The world is divided into 4 spheres, each sphere divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Lines. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Chris Spanos. Coming up on the show, a grand jury will not indict Officer Darren Wilson for the August 9th shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. I'll speak with professor and author Vanelia Randall about the grand jury decision. But first, a look at how English media have reported on Latin America. A tragic milestone went virtually unreported in the English-speaking press last week. Colombia's Victims Unit released its report indicating that a number of victims of Colombia's civil war has now surpassed 7 million. This number includes those who have been killed, disappeared, or displaced since 1956. For a country of under 50 million citizens, these numbers are staggering, and certainly newsworthy, but apparently not for mainstream media in the US. Of course, the violence and the human rights abuses in Colombia have constituted inconvenient truths for Western media, as the US has been a major sponsor of the violence and abuses in that country. Indeed, a notable fact in the Victims Unit report is that the majority of the victimization occurred after 2000, peaking in 2002. Telesur blogger Daniel Kovalik points out that it is not coincidental that Plan Colombia, or Plan Washington as many Colombians have called it, was inaugurated by President Bill Clinton in 2000, thus escalating the conflict to new heights and new levels of barbarity. Plan Colombia is the plan to which the U.S. has given Colombia over $8 billion of mostly military and police assistance. St. Louis prosecuting attorney Robert McCulloch announced Monday, November 24th, that a grand jury would not be indicting Darren Wilson. Darren Wilson is the white police officer who shot and killed unarmed black teenager Michael Brown August 9th this year. Vanelia Randall is Emeritus Professor of Law at the University of Dayton. She is author of Dying While Black and co-founder of Racial Justice Now. She joins me to discuss the grand jury decision. Hello, Professor Randall, and welcome to Imaginary Lines.
Hello, Chris, and thank you for inviting me.
What was your initial reaction upon hearing the news that a grand jury would not indict Darren Wilson?
Well, being a law professor, I realized that and had said that there would be no indictment, largely because here in the United States, police do not get indicted for excessive force or killing people while in the course of duty. Furthermore, the way the prosecutor set up the whole process, he set up a process that was designed to ensure that there would be no indictment.
The state's grand jury process lasted for 3 months. How do you assess this period of deliberation?
First of all, the prosecutor had the option of indicting them without a grand jury. It is not necessary to go to a grand jury. Generally speaking, a prosecutor will go to a grand jury when there is a political cover that they want. So they want to be able to see, because our prosecutors tend to be elected. So they want to be able to say if there's indictment, if there's not indictment, they want to be able to lay it off on the grand jury. But the prosecutor could have indicted him straight out if he wanted to do that. Secondly, the whole process of grand jury is just about looking at the evidence from the point of view of the victim and saying, is there a minimally enough evidence to say that a crime may have been committed? Grand jury deliberations on any particular case is a day or two, because they don't hear all of the evidence. It's not a trial. There's no adversarial attorney in there doing alternative questions. No one is in the room but the grand jury and the prosecutor. The prosecutor gets to ask the questions and then give the grand jury instructions. So it's not a trial. It's not intended to be a trial. So by putting on the defense, which should happen at trial, by calling the defendant in and uh, Darren Wilson in, the prosecutor turned this into a regular trial without the adversarial nature that is in a trial, and thereby assuring that the grand jury would be thoroughly confused because there would be reasonable doubt. There's generally no reasonable doubt at a grand jury process. In fact, there's a saying in the United States: a prosecutor can get a ham sandwich indicted if they want to, because they control the process so much.
After the announcement that Darren Wilson would not be indicted, many media reports focused on the violence that community protesters enacted and who the decision angered. What's your assessment of how the media reported on Ferguson relative to other events of civil unrest in the U.S.?
Well, it's really funny because I live in a community with a college town that just had a riot 6 months ago. They didn't call it a riot. The media didn't report on it as a riot, but 10,000 college students turned out on the campus, overturning cars, setting things on fire, destroying property. And yes, they turned out the police, but they didn't turn them out in riot gear, and they didn't make but 3 arrests. Uh, this and the media helped cover this up by not calling it a riot. If 10,000 Black people had done exactly the same thing, it would be labeled a riot. I think that we have a 24-hour news situation, and what sells in America is Black people getting killed, Black people and brown people uh, that are engaged in some kind of violence so that they can promote the fear to the white community, so they can say, see, this is why we need all the police, because look at how they're acting. um, Other kinds of riots that occur, and many of them occur, especially college related riots. um, uh, Dozens of them occur a year, and the media doesn't even hardly cover them.
How do you understand these events in light of your own experience advocating for equal rights for Black people in the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s?
Well, I'm 70 years old, and I was a part of the civil rights movement. I was a college student in the early 70s, in the late 60s and early 70s. And so I was very much connected with that as a young person. I see this as a human rights movement. It's beyond civil rights, it's human rights. And one of the problems we have in the United States is that while the United States is quick to criticize other countries for its human rights violations, and while it signs on to human rights treaties, it actually doesn't believe that it is the violation of any human rights. And so the biggest issue for this generation is that they have to, like we had to fight to get civil rights recognized, they have to fight to get human rights recognized: the right to eat, the right to live, the right to have an education, the right to work, the right to have a family. All of those things that we think of human rights are impeded one way or another in the United States.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Randolph, for joining me on Imaginary Lines.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Imaginary Lines. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Chris Spanos. Please join me next week.